Ethan Hale had never allowed anyone to see him weak. In Chicago's elite investment circles, he was a figure carved from ice, rational, emotionless, and always right. His decisions could move markets. His glances could silence boardrooms. People called him the Ice King. And in nearly a year of working for him, Clara Monroe had never seen a single crack in that facade. She was his personal assistant at Hale Capital, a venture firm specializing in tech and community health. Her job was to be at Ethan's side every day, organizing schedules, handling documents, anticipating his needs before he spoke. She had learned to walk softly, speak briefly, avoid unnecessary eye contact. Ethan didn't need kindness, and he certainly didn't want empathy. He wanted efficiency, and Clara delivered it perfectly. Until that night. It was close to midnight when Clara climbed up to Ethan's penthouse with a last-minute contract for his signature. He almost never left the office before 9 p.m., but that evening he had disappeared early with no explanation. When Clara arrived, the hallway was silent. The door to the apartment was slightly ajar, warm steam curling into the corridor with a thick unease she couldn't name. She hesitated. Ethan hated interruptions. He despised weakness. But the sound of running water, relentless and sharp, echoed from within. And so she stepped inside. The apartment was immaculate, as always, but condensation on the walls led her toward the bathroom. When she opened the door, the sight froze her where she stood. Ethan was collapsed under the shower, water pounding over his body. He was completely bare, his shoulders trembling with shallow breaths. In one hand, he held a photograph, crumpled, scorched at the edges. His eyes were shut tight, but the water couldn't hide the truth. Ethan was crying. Clara couldn't move, couldn't pretend she hadn't seen. In that moment, the flawless ice around him had shattered, and she was the only one who saw it happen. The next morning, Ethan Hale walked into the office at 8:30 sharp, punctual, composed, immaculate. White shirt, charcoal suit, familiar black folder in hand. He nodded once as he passed Clara's desk. No eye contact, no expression, no words. As if last night had never happened. Clara tried to act normal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, replying to emails, updating his calendar, every motion precise, professional, practiced. But her heart stuttered every time she heard his footsteps approach or when his voice drifted through the office walls. He said nothing about what she'd seen, no mention, no trace of acknowledgement. And yet, the silence wasn't the hard part. It was the wall, thicker now, colder than ever. She told herself that maybe this was better. Maybe he was ashamed or angry or simply determined to pretend it hadn't happened. She wouldn't blame him. She might have done the same. But what she couldn't do was forget. She began noticing things she hadn't before. The way his jaw clenched when someone said the wrong thing, the dark circles under his eyes, the soft tapping of his fingers on the table when the room went quiet. They weren't signs of power. They were symptoms of someone barely holding it together. Ethan had never been friendly. He never offered personal details. But now each gesture felt like a hidden message, and Clara found herself understanding a language she'd never studied. The language of people trying not to fall apart. One Friday evening, long after most had gone home, Clara stayed behind to finalize preparations for next week's investor trip. The office was quiet. She was adjusting a document when she heard the soft rhythm of footsteps. Steady, familiar. Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the city. Clara didn't speak. She didn't move. She simply watched him from her desk, her hands paused mid-type. He didn't look back, but in that still silence between them, something shifted, an unspoken recognition. The next day, Ethan entered a design meeting where Clara was leading a presentation. He said nothing, just stood silently at the back of the room, not watching the slides or the team, but watching her. After the room cleared, he approached her, his face neutral, but his eyes were different. "You handled that better than I would have," he said. Clara blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a challenge, but the absence of his usual edge told her it was genuine. His voice was softer, as if some weight had been set down. For the first time, Clara felt like more than just his assistant. She felt seen. One evening, Clara stayed late at the office, organizing documents in Ethan's private suite. He had left early, something that had become increasingly common, and she took advantage of the quiet to get ahead for the coming week. While rearranging the bookshelf behind his desk, she noticed one thick book slightly out of line, its spine uneven, as if someone had recently pulled it out and hastily returned it. Curious, Clara slid the book from the shelf. A thin slip of paper fluttered to the floor. It wasn't a memo or a contract. It was a photograph. She bent down and picked it up. A faded print, edges curled and scorched. 3 people stood in the frame. A teenage boy, Ethan unmistakably, but younger, his hair longer, his eyes brighter. A woman rested a hand on his shoulder. And a smaller boy, so similar in appearance they could have been mirrors, but softer, gentler, with a hesitant smile. Clara's heartbeat slowed. A younger brother? Or a twin? The sound of the door opening pulled her back to the present. Ethan stepped into the room. His eyes landed immediately on the photo in her hand. He froze. No anger, no panic, just silence, stretching long and heavy with unspoken sorrow. Clara didn't speak. She didn't move. She waited. At last he exhaled and sank into the chair. "Liam," he said, "my twin brother." She sat across from him, still quiet. "He was different," Ethan continued, his voice rough. "Liam was on the autism spectrum. He didn't speak much, but he was brilliant, in a way the world didn't know how to handle. School didn't understand him. Our family didn't try. My parents thought he could be fixed." Ethan stared toward the glass windows. His shoulders tightened. "I was the only one who got him. I knew how he thought when he needed quiet, when he was panicking. But one day," he swallowed, "I left him." Clara held her breath. "I'd just gotten into MIT. That night, I went to stay at a friend's dorm, just for the weekend. I needed space. I needed air." His voice cracked slightly. "By the time I came back, the house was gone. No one knows how the fire started, but Liam didn't make it out." Silence filled the room like fog. "My parents never forgave me, but worse than that," he turned to look at her, "I never forgave myself." Clara didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, "It wasn't your fault." She just met his gaze, long and steady, and said softly, "You still keep this photo?" Ethan nodded. "It's the only thing that makes me feel like he was real." Another moment passed. Then he added, barely audible, "Hail Capital. I think I built it for Liam. I didn't know it back then, but now I'm sure. He used to dream of creating machines that could think, but kinder than humans." Clara looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a man with power, but as a brother, hurting, broken, and trying to remember how to feel whole again. And for the first time since that night beneath the running water, Ethan let someone see his heart. After that night, the silence between Clara and Ethan felt different. It was no longer the cold distance of professionalism. It was a quiet born of understanding, as if they were now sharing a secret neither had spoken aloud. Ethan never brought up Liam again. Clara didn't ask, but something between them had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but in subtle ways. The way they looked at each other, the way they shared space. Ethan began doing small, unfamiliar things. He knocked gently before entering her office. Sometimes he asked what she was reading, or simply left a cup of coffee on her desk without a word. To most, it would mean nothing. But coming from Ethan, it meant everything. Because it was effort. Because it was connection, awkward but intentional. Clara responded cautiously at first. She feared it was temporary, that when guilt returned, Ethan would withdraw again. But then, one late evening, as she was gathering her things to leave, he called out, "Clara!" She turned. The dim lighting in the office wrapped them in a strange kind of calm. "I used to play the piano," he said, voice so low she barely caught it. "Not well, but Liam liked it. He used to sit beside me, swaying to the rhythm." Clara smiled gently. "Do you still remember any songs?" Ethan shrugged. "Bits and pieces. My fingers only know how to sign contracts now." They both laughed, for the first time, not awkwardly, not defensively. In the days that followed, their relationship became something undefined. They were still boss and assistant, but beyond the meetings and strategy decks, there were short conversations about childhood, books, music, rainy days. Ethan didn't open up completely. He still kept most of the pain to himself. But Clara began to see that his silence wasn't always a wall. It was sometimes a doorway, waiting for someone patient enough to walk through. One afternoon, passing by his office, Clara heard the sharp sound of glass breaking. She rushed inside and found him standing over a shattered tumbler, tension written across his face, eyes red. "Messed up another deal," he muttered. "They think I'm unfeeling, robotic. Maybe they're right." Clara stepped closer, gently. "You're not a robot, Ethan. You just don't show things the way others do." He looked at her, storm in his gaze. "But you saw, didn't you? That night? You saw who I really am." Clara nodded slowly. "I did?" His voice broke. "And you didn't run." Ethan sat down, as if the weight of it all had finally become too much. For the first time, Clara sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Not once did Ethan ask why Clara stayed that night. He broke down. Not once did Clara bring up the photograph in his hand. But between them, something was growing, slowly, quietly, like morning light slipping through a half-open window. The first touch happened by accident. One morning, they both reached to pick up a document that had fallen. Their fingers brushed, brief, feather-light, but enough for Clara to pull back like she'd been burned. Ethan did too. He didn't look at her, but his hand paused for half a second before moving on. After that, every interaction carried something unspoken, his gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary, the shrinking space between them during late-night meetings, and sometimes just a strange silence that filled the room when they were alone together. Clara wasn't sure if it was affection. Maybe it was just empathy, a connection born from mutual grief. But still, every time he walked past and his shoulder grazed hers, or when his eyes found her across a crowded boardroom, her heart skipped a beat. Ethan changed too, not overtly, not dramatically, but undeniably. He asked for her opinion on things outside work. He smiled, not often, but genuinely. And sometimes, just sometimes, he looked at her like he wanted to say something, but didn't. They kept their distance, kept it safe. Neither of them dared name the thing that was growing quietly between them. But both of them knew it was there. But just as the silence between them began to feel warm instead of hollow, just as each brush of the hand no longer felt accidental, the past stepped in, wearing a name Clara had never been ready to face. Juliet. Juliet appeared on a Monday morning. Clara was organizing files for a meeting when a tall, elegant woman stepped into the reception area. Her beige trench coat fluttered behind her like she had walked out of a Parisian film. She smiled at the receptionist, then turned toward Clara, steel gray eyes, sharp, confident. "Hello, I'm Juliet Bennett. Ethan said you're the first person I should talk to." Clara stood, offering a polite handshake. "I'll take you up." They rode the elevator in silence for 10 floors. Juliet broke it first. "How long have you been here?" "Almost a year," Clara replied. Juliet gave a soft, knowing smile, eyes fixed on the mirrored wall. "Longer than I expected. Ethan usually doesn't keep people around that long. It didn't take many words. Clara understood. Juliet wasn't just here for business. Ethan stepped out of his office just as they arrived. "Juliet." His tone was calm, neither cold nor warm, but his gaze paused for a heartbeat when he saw Clara. Just a second, but Juliet caught it. After that, Juliet became a regular presence. Officially, she was consulting on an international deal. But Clara knew better. This wasn't about contracts. Juliet moved through the office like she still belonged. Casual comments floated in the air. "Ethan used to prefer French press coffee, though I suppose his tastes have changed." Or, "This place hasn't changed since I was last here." They weren't direct, but each word carried the sweetness of a blade. Clara stayed composed. She told herself she was just the assistant, that someone like Ethan having a past with someone like Juliet made perfect sense. But then came the glances. Juliet didn't look at her with hostility, but with pity. One evening, Clara stepped into the elevator to head home. Just as the doors were closing, Juliet slipped inside. The air grew thick. "You know," Juliet began, "I once thought I could fix Ethan, but he doesn't heal. He just rewrites his code." Clara turned, voice steady but soft. "Maybe he just needed the right environment," Juliet smirked. "Or maybe you're just the placeholder until the grief resets him." The doors opened. Juliet exited without looking back. Clara remained, chest tight. The next 3 days were tense. Ethan didn't check in like usual, didn't pause at her desk. Meetings became clinical, efficient, cold. On the third night, Clara stood outside his office door, unsure what hurt more, the silence or not knowing what it meant. She walked in. Ethan was signing papers, not looking up. "Who is Juliet to you?" He froze, his eyes lifted, measured, guarded. "She's no one that matters anymore." "She doesn't seem to think so." His jaw tightened. "Juliet liked the version of me that felt nothing. That version died the night you saw me on the bathroom floor." Clara stared at him. "And the one standing here now. Is he going to stay?" Ethan stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of her. "I don't know how to be that man," he said, voice low. "I don't know how to love without fearing I'll be left behind." Clara's voice trembled. "Then let me show you. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, Ethan reached for her hand. No flinch, no shame. A touch not meant to push her away, but to begin something neither of them could take back. The memory of Ethan's touch stayed with Clara as she left his office that night. Not because it was tender, but because it was real. For the first time, he hadn't pulled away, but that made it more terrifying. Because once that door opened, it could lead to love, or to devastation. The next day, everything seemed normal. Too normal. Ethan wore his professional mask again, polite smile, calm tone. But Clara noticed something missing. He no longer looked at her, no longer searched for her across the meeting table, no morning coffee waiting on her desk. The distance wasn't accidental. It was intentional retreat. That night, she didn't go home. She stayed alone in the conference room, laptop open, but untouched. In her chest, a question pulsed over and over. What am I to you? But she wasn't ready to say it aloud. Until day 3, when Ethan announced he was accepting a long-term project in Singapore. Clara knew if she didn't speak now, she would lose him, and lose the belief that what existed between them had ever been real. She knocked on his office door. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Clara." "I need to know," she began, voice hoarse with exhaustion. "What I mean to you. Or am I just someone who helps you forget your guilt?" He stood but didn't come closer. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she pressed. You don't say anything, you don't hold on, but you won't let go." He said nothing, and in that silence, she saw it clearly. He was afraid, not of her, of himself. "Juliet was right," she whispered. "I'm standing in the shadow of someone you still haven't let go of." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're not a shadow." "Then why won't you choose me?" For the first time, he had no answer. "I love you," she said softly, "but I can't keep wondering if this is real. I can't keep loving a man who's still chasing ghosts." Ethan stepped back as if her words had pierced straight through him. "I'm not ready," he said, voice low but certain. "I'm trying, but I'm not ready to be the man you need." Clara nodded, slowly, sadly. "Then maybe you never will be." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I'm leaving," she said, turning toward the door. Her hand hesitated on the handle. "Clara." She didn't turn. "Don't call me unless you're sure you want to fight for me." The door shut softly behind her, but the echo rang like a crack in the foundation. That night, Clara cried, not because he didn't love her, but because she had hoped he'd stay. They never said goodbye, no final words, no promises. Just the quiet click of a closing door, and then silence, thick and cold, seeped into every part of Clara's day, like fog. She didn't return to the office for the next 2 days. She worked remotely, answered emails on time, kept everything looking professional. But inside, she felt like she was falling in slow motion, weightless, directionless. What hurt the most wasn't the end. It was that Ethan didn't try to stop her. On the third morning, as she stepped out of her apartment building, the doorman called her over. "This came for you," he said, handing her a cream-colored envelope. "No sender, no postage stamp." Clara opened it once she was back in her apartment. Inside was a small, worn piece of paper. The edges were frayed. The handwriting was crooked, childish. "I'm sorry I broke your robot. I just wanted to see how it worked. Please don't be mad. You're the best brother. I love you more than computers. Liam." Clara held the paper in her hands, heart aching with a gentle kind of pain. She pictured a little boy scribbling in his room, trying to explain himself the only way he knew how. Not with guilt, but with love, pure, simple, forgiving. It was a part of Ethan he had never let anyone else see, but somehow he had let Clara glimpse it, not through words, but through a memory of a brother long gone. And in that moment, Clara wasn't angry anymore. She just wished Ethan had the courage to live the way Liam once believed he could. Because sometimes the most radical act of love is to believe someone is still worth saving, even when they don't believe it themselves. Clara didn't know where she was going until her feet brought her there, a small therapy center tucked along the edge of the city park. Ethan had mentioned the place once, a facility he quietly funded, one that worked with children like Liam. He'd never stepped inside. He once told her, "I don't have the courage to see what Liam could have had if he just lived a little longer." That afternoon, the center was still. Soft sunlight spilled through the trees, and in the garden out back, Clara saw him. Ethan sat alone on a wooden bench, his shoulders hunched, hands clasped between his knees. He wasn't the powerful man behind Hale Capital. Not here. Here, he was a brother, searching for a piece of himself he thought he'd lost. She approached. He looked up, and in his eyes was something she'd never seen so clearly before. Hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. She sat beside him. Neither spoke. The silence stretched, but it wasn't cold. It was space. Space to breathe, to wait, to be. "I came here because I didn't know where else to go," Ethan said, still looking at the grass. There was a boy inside today, nonverbal, just kept building and destroying the same Lego tower, over and over, just like Liam used to. Clara glanced at him gently. "And you thought, If you sat here long enough, the guilt would disappear?" He shook his head, voice rough. "No, I just wanted to remember who I used to be, before the silence swallowed everything, before I forgot that I was once a boy who just needed someone to believe he was still good." Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the letter, Liam's letter. "That's why you sent me this?" she asked softly. Ethan turned toward her. "It's the only part of him that ever felt like forgiveness, and if you read it, maybe you'd understand why I run, why I hurt people even when I don't mean to." She nodded, her eyes stinging. "I don't need an apology. I need honesty." He was quiet for a moment. Then, voice trembling, he said, "When I look at you, I see someone who stayed, even when I didn't deserve it, even when I didn't know how to hold on." Clara placed her hand over his. "Then stop running. Be scared, but stay." Ethan's fingers curled around hers, like for the first time in his life, he was holding on to something he no longer wanted to lose. And perhaps in that very moment, amidst the quiet garden and the weight of memory, they both understood. Healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from rebuilding what was once lost. The next day, Ethan took Clara somewhere she'd never seen before, a worn-down building on the edge of West Loop, surrounded by red brick walls and dust-covered glass panes. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but inside, it held something that made Clara fall silent. A long table sat in the center of the room, covered with sketches, paper models, and old hand-drawn diagrams. Beside it was a notebook, soft-bound, its pages yellowed with time, filled with scribbles, robots, mazes, spaceships. In the corner of one page, a child's handwriting read, "Learning place for different people." "Liam drew these," Ethan said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't say much, but when he drew, it was like he knew exactly what he needed. This was the place he always dreamed of, a space where no one asked him to be like everyone else. Clara turned the pages slowly. In every sketch was a dream left unfinished, and now a brother trying to piece it back together. "I started renovating this place a few weeks ago," Ethan said, fingers brushing over one of the sketches. Quietly. No one knew, no press, no groundbreaking ceremony. I figured, if it failed, at least no one would be watching. Clara stepped beside him, looking at the plans, quiet learning spaces, sensory rooms, AI-powered personalization. "But now," she whispered, "you're not doing it alone." Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers. No hesitation, no fear, just something soft, something true. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice rough with vulnerability. "Because if you stay, this won't just be a project. It'll be a life." Clara smiled, a small smile, steady and sure. "I'm still here, aren't I?" They stood there in the empty room, surrounded by blueprints and the pale gold light filtering through dusty windows. No more words, no need for reasons, no need for perfection. Ethan lifted a hand and gently touched her cheek, as if afraid the moment would break. But Clara didn't pull away. She tilted her head, and their lips met. Slowly, quietly, like a confession written without words. It wasn't a kiss of fire or urgency. It was a recognition that they'd come this far, that they were still bruised, still healing. But they had chosen to stay, to heal, together. And in that moment, with a dream reborn around them, Ethan Hale knew. This wasn't redemption anymore. This was the beginning of something real. In the weeks that followed, it stopped being just blueprints. It became real, from the early morning sounds of drills to the scent of fresh paint mixing with the coffee Clara made each afternoon. Ethan wasn't just signing approvals anymore. He did more. He carried materials, checked every room himself, even knelt down to paint over tiny scuffs in the hallway, insisting, "Liam would have liked to see blue here." Clara carefully designed each space, the sound-dampened rooms, the low-light library, the transition zone for kids to adjust before stepping into classrooms. She said, "Not every child walks into the world the same way. We just need to build more doors." They weren't weighed down by the past anymore. They were building. Every brick, every decision, every quiet act was filled with meaning. Sometimes Ethan would stand in an unfinished room, watching Clara bent over her design notes, sunlight streaming in through the arched windows, and he'd think, if peace has a shape, maybe it looks like this. Even the construction team had adjusted. They were no longer just the cold CEO and the quiet assistant. They were a team, a group shaping something that mattered. And now that dream had a name, the Liam Center. One evening, as they sat on the floor of the main room, Ethan said, "I used to think I didn't deserve to create anything beautiful. But you changed that." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Not because I fixed you, but because you finally stopped pushing love away." She looked up at the ceiling, still unpainted, beams exposed. But to her, it already felt like home. A place that would heal not just the children who came through it, but also two adults who once thought they'd missed their chance. The future didn't arrive with fireworks. It came in small, steady steps. Together. Before they knew it, blueprints turned into walls, quiet moments into days, and shared dreams into a life. Years passed, not loudly, but softly, like the way snow settles. Gently, completely. Now the house echoed with a child's laughter, the warmth of peace, and in the quietest, most ordinary moments, Clara realized they had truly come home. One early morning, Clara woke to the soft light slipping through the curtains. The apartment was still, except for the hum of the heater and the faint smell of toast from the kitchen. She sat up slowly, only to find Ethan's side of the bed empty. For a brief moment, her heart thudded, afraid he had retreated into old patterns. Then she heard the sound of running water. Barefoot, she padded toward the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, steam curling out like mist. She stood quietly and looked in, and what she saw made her breath catch in her chest. Ethan was standing beneath the shower, the soft light outlining his shoulders. In his arms was their newborn daughter, Harper, resting peacefully against his chest. He held her gently, as though cradling something sacred and weightless. It looked like that first night, the night Clara had seen him broken, drowning in grief. But today, he wasn't breaking. Today, he was alive. Clara stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Steam clung to her skin, but she didn't feel the cold. Ethan tilted his head toward her, and in his eyes was something she hadn't seen before. Peace. "Do you remember the first night?" he asked quietly. "I thought I'd lost everything." Clara rested her cheek against his back. "And now?" He looked down at Harper and whispered, "Now I'm not running anymore." On the small shelf by the sink were two framed photographs. One was old and worn, Liam smiling shyly, holding a robot model. Beside it was a new picture, Harper asleep in Clara's arms, morning light brushing her cheek, the past and present living side by side. Clara stared at the frames for a long time, then spoke, not to comfort, not to explain, but simply to tell the truth. "We don't heal by forgetting. We heal by building beside the memories." Ethan gently tightened his hold on her. Neither of them spoke after that. They didn't need to, because every loss, every scar, every moment they thought they wouldn't make it, had led them here. Two people who had once shattered, who once believed they didn't deserve happiness, had chosen to stay, chosen to rebuild, not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. As the sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the white walls and wooden floors, Ethan placed Harper in the crib by the window. Clara stepped onto the balcony with her tea, gazing down at the city where dreams had once been built, lost, and now reignited. Ethan joined her, arms circling the woman he once feared to love, but now couldn't imagine life without. "I never thought I'd make it here," he said. Clara smiled, her eyes tracing the skyline. "I think this place was always waiting for us. We just had to be ready." Inside, Harper stirred softly. Her quiet breathing mingled with the steady rhythm of a home finally at peace. And there, in that gentle, complete moment, a new chapter began. And perhaps this was what healing truly meant, not turning away from the past, but learning how to let it live beside you, as you choose joy again and again.